in our fifth lockdown for the last year and a half, I suppose. And so feeling the pinch of isolation, which is interesting, an interesting experience. I was contacted a week ago to speak on values. And I always function better if somebody tells me what to speak about. When I'm asked, well, you choose your own subject, then I'm usually in a state of petrification. and then I spend a few days worrying about what will I talk about? What will I talk about? And and thinking about values. What do we value in Krishna consciousness? What is what are our values? And of course, our values, especially I think of the 26 qualities of a devotee. And these are very prominent characteristics of things that we highly value in Krishna consciousness and want to see manifest in our own personalities. And then I was being well, not exactly harassed. I couldn't say I was being harassed, but naturally Rameshwari was concerned, not having received a topic from me. So out of the numbers of topics that I could have chosen from, I somehow or other was attracted to the notion of service and the quality of service, because one of the primary characteristics of bhakti is the quality of service. It's a subtle thing, a very, very subtle thing, but observable through a devotee's activities and observable through their speech, what they say, what they do, what they say, and of course those activities and those words predicate or not predicate, they indicate the state of consciousness. And so the quality of what we do, the quality of what we say is a manifestation, if you like, of the heart of a devotee. And the subtle, activities of devotion or devotional service. So, the service attitude is a very important and essential quality or characteristic that we work on throughout all of our, it's part of our devotional life, part of our devotional practice. Unmotivated devotional service. So I was thinking, first verse that I was thinking about was the verse from the Sixth Shastaka, Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam va jagadisha kamaye mama jamani jamanamishwari bhavatat bhakti ahoitiki tvai. So this ahoitiki, this unmotivated, this spontaneous mood of service is a critical element in a devotee's cultivation of Krishna consciousness. Really, really important. And we value the correct service attitude of a devotee. So I wanted to share a number of stories that illustrate my experience, I guess, rather than, not terribly philosophical, but of course, whilst we're philosophical, we're also concerned with action, with what we do, how our devotional service is manifest on the physical or on the practical plane. Prabhupada says that, Rupa Goswami says also that devotional service is both an internal cultivation, but also that internal cultivation is a practice. It's an activity as well. But of course, the activity, it has a foundation, and that foundation is somewhat subtle. The motivation of our action, why we do something, is very, very important. I remember when I think about service, one of my first, most of the time I think certainly speaking from personal experience, where I know myself, I'm somewhat self-centered. And so for most of my life, especially as a child and as a teenager and as a young adult, I really didn't think very much of service to others. I was only concerned about, and probably still am, concerned about, what's in it for me. There's this, have you heard of WIIFM? WIIFM. It's a radio station, FM radio station. But what is it? What's in it for me? That's what WIIFM stands for. What's in it for me? And I hadn't had much experience. Well, we spent a lot of our time, say, pleasing our parents or trying to please our parents, never satisfying them. And very often, certainly in my experience, mainly because I was selfish. Part of the problem was I was the first child. And so, for a good part of my childhood, my parents were telling me what a wonderful fellow I was. And of course, your parents are always looking after you and working hard to satisfy your desires. And so it's not unusual that we, especially if you're a firstborn child, it's not unusual to think of yourself as the center of the universe. And so I didn't have a lot of experience. I had experience serving others, but usually it was motivated. Like when you get a job, you're working for the benefit of others, but you're also getting something in return. And even though you may get some money or some privilege or some position in return, it's never satisfying. It's never enough. and it's always it's temporary. It's not very satisfying. So when I was in my early 20s, Ajincha Rupa and I, Ajincha Rupa is my wife, we were living in a kind of a reversed role situation. She was studying and I was unemployed. This is early 20s. And just before we met the devotees and decided to take up Krishna consciousness as a way of life. And we were vegetarians. And one of my first visits, my first visit to the temple in Adelaide, we were living in Adelaide at the time, was to buy a cookbook. We knew that, well, I knew where I think all of the 3 vegetarian cookbooks in Adelaide were, because I used to spend time going to bookstores, and because I knew I wanted to be a vegetarian, but I didn't know how. In fact, in those days, if you were a vegetarian, you were something of a freak. Of course, in Indian culture, veg and non-veg, it's a cultural phenomenon, right? It's natural to be a vegetarian because that's the base culture of what we might call Hindu culture, and of course devotional culture. So I discovered that one of my friends told me the Hare Krishnas have got a cookbook, a vegetarian cookbook. So I thought, well, I should. So my first visit to the temple was to get a cookbook, and I was the cook. Ajincha Rupa was studying and working, and I had plenty of spare time because I wasn't really doing anything. But what I started doing, which I hadn't done very much beforehand, was cook. And it's interesting because even though we might not think of distributing cookbooks as book distribution, as a result of my getting that cookbook, I learned about a number of elements of devotional culture, and the 4 regulated principles, and specifically no meat eating, no meat, fish, or eggs in food. Oh, well, more important than that when you're cooking, you offer the food to Krishna, right? Which is a subtle thing. and that subtle thing is elementary to that mood of service to Krishna. So I read in the cookbook that before you honor anything that you eat, you first of all offer it to Krishna. And of course, in the process of creating or preparing that offering, you do it as in a mood of love and devotion. And I already knew how to chant Hare Krishna because when I was 15, I met a devotee who was out on book distribution, and he gave me a card. Actually, I thought he was going to ask me for money, and I decided if he asked me for money, I'm not going to give him anything. Right? So he disarmed me, because instead of asking me for money, he just gave me an invitation to the Sunday feast. But on the back of the card was the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And I'd learned how to chant Hare Krishna. So on reading the cookbook and reading how to prepare food, I discovered that cooking was actually a form of meditation. And so when I was cooking, on occasion, I would chant Hare Krishna as well as part of that meditation, if you like, and as part of the offering. And I hadn't picked this up from the devotees. I only got this from the cookbook. But of course, it's an essential element of what we do as devotees, that we try to offer everything with that mood of devotion. So that was my, I guess, if you like, first introduction to what we might call devotional service, and a development of the mood of doing things for the pleasure of others, and which is essential. This is anukulyena, right? That our mood of service is favourable. You know, in the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada explains how there are demons who give Krishna pleasure by fighting with him, but their mood is not favourable. You know, they want to destroy Krishna. Right? So they're even though they're rendering service, it's not actually devotional service. It's inimical. Whereas the mood of a devotee is it's favourable. Well, it should be favourable. You know, sometimes we're challenged by difficult circumstances and by obstacles, material and spiritual, that we perceive as being a threat to us. And you know, sometimes we think, Krishna, why are you doing this to me? You know, I'm your pure devotee. Of course, not so pure. But this mood of offering, if you like, or it's bhakti. It's a symptom of bhakti. Is very important, something that we value or should value and cherish. So an interesting phenomena from, you know, I mean, cooking and eating is basically, you know, selfish, if only for self-preservation. But usually, you know, we're cooking to create something that's tasty, pleasing to the senses. Right? So it's kind of, cooking is interesting. Cooking and eating, if you like, is interesting because it's sense gratification. It's also self-preservation. So I discovered that there were subtle benefits, if you like, and personal benefits derived from cooking with the right attitude. And so what I discovered was that by cooking for the pleasure of Krishna, I was becoming very satisfied. But what I discovered was that when I was cooking for others, that they became very happy and satisfied too. In fact, my wife complains now because after we started living together, after when we joined the temple, we became, I joined the brahmachari ashram and she joined the brahmacharini. The devotees separated us. This wasn't uncommon in the 70s and in the 80s. If you joined with your girlfriend or with your wife, the devotees would inevitably suggest, well, you should get some training. And, you know, that training meant go and live in the ashram separately from your partner or spouse. So after a couple of years of training, we were married and started living together. And of course, we were on Sankirtan for a long time. So it wasn't until, I don't know, 5, 6 years after we were married that we started eating regularly at home. And since then, Achintyaritwa's been the cook. And she often complains, "Why? How come I'm the cook? You used to be the cook. Now I'm the cook. What happened?" So anyway, what I discovered in my cooking adventures was that people enjoyed my cooking, which I guess is a wonder in and of itself, because I had no experience. Nobody had taught me. I learned how to cook just by reading cookbooks. And I know most of you, especially the ladies, would have learned cooking from your mum or from your sister. You would have been taught, shown how to cook. I learned from cooking from a cookbook. And so it was a bit of trial and error. But what I discovered was that people enjoyed my cooking. And then what I discovered from that was that I enjoyed them enjoying my cooking. And so the motivation for cooking wasn't just simply filling my belly or cooking something that I liked, but rather my motivation for cooking became a desire to make others happy, and that I got more satisfaction out of seeing others happy than just eating the meal myself. And so I learned something from service, from rendering service, that more valuable than satisfying yourself by, honouring the meals that I cooked, I actually got satisfaction from serving others. And it was a revelation for me, that service is actually very appealing and very attractive, and that serving others is not a burden, but one gets great satisfaction and pleasure from seeing others happy. And so, this was an interesting reciprocation, a benefit, if you like, that I hadn't expected, and made service very attractive. I remember when I first went to the temple, we were living in some suburbs away, and we used to go to the temple often to help out. But and so I was attracted. I thought I was a good cook, and I certainly enjoyed serving others. I found that very attractive, and we used to go for lunch at the temple or go to the feast, and I was very attracted just by the very simple act of the devotees who would get us all to sit down, and then they would serve, and I found that very, very exciting. And so I wanted to get up and serve, and the devotees would say, no, you have to sit down. And I think, well, why won't you let me serve? And I guess, at that stage of my career, I was still new to Krishna consciousness. And so, I probably wasn't considered suchi and clean enough And, you know, the devotees weren't sure about my qualifications as a devotee, and so they wouldn't let me serve. And I was disappointed. In fact, I was upset that, well, aren't I good enough? What's wrong with me? Why can't I serve? And that developed in me a desire to want to prove that I was qualified to serve, that I should be allowed to serve, and that I was qualified to serve. But I found it very attractive that the devotees, when they invited you to the temple for a feast, that they sat you down and then they personally served everything on your plate. Then after you'd eaten, they would come around again and would say, what else would you like? Is there anything else that you want? And so again, there's, you know, the reciprocations from service. And especially, you know, when you're serving somebody that's it's a challenge, because, you know, you want to please them, you want to satisfy them. And of course, then there's that reciprocation where when you're satisfying somebody, when you're pleasing them, when you're serving them, then they become satisfied, but you also get the benefit. There's a taste or a mellow that one experiences from rendering service. I remember, speaking of service, later on when I was probably 1985, I became the Sunday Feast coordinator. And, you know, the Sunday Feast and so I headed up a team of devotees who were serving out the feast, the Sunday Feast. And of course, you know, I knew when I put my hand up for becoming the Sunday Feast coordinator that I was basically setting myself up for anxiety, because, you know, 150, 200 people would come to the temple in those days. We had feasts that might have 10 preparations. And so I had to organise all the devotees who were going to serve out, had to make sure all the utensils were there, had to make sure that everything was, you know, in order, so that when those 150 or 200 people came up the stairs, that we were able to serve them and, you know, serve them nicely so that they'd be satisfied. And so because of that, I was also the coordinator of the serving to the sannyasis and the gurus that visited. And I remember some of the biggest challenges were serving the senior sannyasis, especially Tamal Krishna Goswami. He was intensely particular about where you put the prasadam on his plate. And so, you know, if you happen to put, say, the kofta in the wrong spot, then you could get blasted. It doesn't happen very often these days. And in fact, if I'm too particular about where somebody puts something, the devotees wonder why I get upset. But I remember serving Bhavananda, Harikesh, then Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Maharaj in particular. It was a challenge. It was quite a challenge. You had to have everything arranged nicely. You had to present everything in a very pleasing and satisfying fashion, and then serve and pay attention. You had to pay attention to detail. And keep in mind, these devotees were trained by Srila Prabhupada. And so I always took it that They were training me in the same mood as they were trained personally by Srila Prabhupada. So it was a great challenge. But another thing that I discovered was if you paid attention to detail and if you presented everything in a way that was very accomplished and done with care and concern, then even the most particular prasadam taker can be satisfied. And so, and then if you serve the devotees very nicely, paying attention to the details, then they'd be happy, they'd be satisfied. And of course, what's the end result of that? I was also then happy and satisfied to have pleased the devotees. You know, so it's the mood of service, especially it's part of our culture, really important aspect of our culture, manifest in this, you know, this, what is it? Bhunte Bo Jayate Chaiva, as mentioned by Rupa Goswami. One of the items of loving exchanges. So service, when it's done with care and attention and with the intention of pleasing others, and certainly pleasing Krishna, is an essential element of our culture, of our tradition. You know, we'd always be very enthusiastic about new devotees joining the temple. And everybody would become very excited. In the early, late 70s in ISKCON Australia and New Zealand, and we were kind of presently we're separated as zones, if you like, within ISKCON. But in the late 70s and early 80s, Australia and New Zealand were one zone, and Harisori was our GBC. And if somebody joined a temple in anywhere, Christchurch or Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, it was news, and the word spread out. Oh, somebody's joined the temple in Christchurch. Whoa! And you know, there were about 90 devotees, and practically no congregation in those days. And so, you know, if somebody joined the Hare Krishna movement, it was big. It was a big news. And you know, in those first from 78 to, you know, just after Prabhupada's passing away, from 77 to say 83, 82, 83, the number of devotees increased exponentially. And so we went from, say, about 100 devotees in 4 years to 400. So more than tripled, quadrupled in size. And which, you know, when you think about it, it's not very many. But of course, those 400 devotees did a lot. And we were always excited when somebody joined the temple, but most excited when that devotee joined and showed a service attitude. And, you know, which meant whatever you asked them to do, they would do it. And then once they'd done it, they'd come bouncing back for more. What do you want me to do now? You know, and not choosy about whether it was washing pots or sweeping the floors or serving prasadam. If somebody showed a service attitude and they embraced every activity that they were asked to perform, then they were considered a bhakta, what we used to go, he's a real bhakta, because whatever you ask him to do, he'll do it, right? And with enthusiasm and with a smile. Of course, you know, it probably didn't take that long to wipe the smile off of our faces after, you know, not enough sleep and hours and hours of service. But, you know, it was always appreciated by the devotees, that anybody who shows a preparedness to render service and you know, I guess render a service more than just honouring prasadam. Prasadam is the easiest service to perform. Honouring prasadam is the easiest, but there's more challenging. And so, you know, this is critical, and it's a subtle thing. It's what does Prabhupada say? Prabhupada says this is the quality of work. And an area that we have to work on to perfect, to fine tune. And of course, Rupa Goswami explains how that service should be favourable, anukulyena, but it should be free, anya bilashita shunyam. It should be free from material motivations for the benefits that we might get, or jnana karma dhyana. You're not covered by some gain, a philosophical gain, or some accumulation of knowledge or whatever, but rather the service should be done for the pleasure of Krishna without concern for the benefits that we might receive ourselves. Since I'm on a prasadam theme, I can tell you another story. I used to, one of my first services when I joined the temple was to divide the breakfast and prepare the breakfast for the devotees. And in those days, we used to save the 9 o'clock Mahaprasadam for breakfast. I think the devotees discovered that if you ate the 9 o'clock, and the 9 o'clock Maha was puris and 3 sabjis, all cooked with ghee. But so, and I used to love the 9 o'clock, but I discovered that if you ate, this is 9 o'clock at night, right? If you ate the 9 o'clock prasadam, then 4 o'clock was a nightmare. It was very, very difficult to wake up. So for some reason or other, and we used to save the prasadam. All of the prasadam was locked up in a cupboard, the Mahaprasadam, and it was put aside for guests. But of course, the devotees loved Mahaprasadam too. And there were stories of, you know, devotees getting the key to the Mahaprasadam cupboard, getting in and eating all of the Mahaprasadam, and then being discovered asleep in the cupboard. So anyway, I used to get the remnants of all of the Mahaprasadam that was left in the Prasadam cupboard, plus what had been offered for the breakfast offering, and the milk sweets, what was left over from the milk sweets, because they were locked up as well. And then they'd all be served for breakfast. And I had the opportunity to make up a plate beforehand. So, you know, you could make up your own, you know, take all the delicacies and just keep them for yourself. That was an option. But for some reason, I decided, no, the proper etiquette is feed everybody else, and then what's left over, that's what I'll take. And, you know, I still do love burfi, right? And there was, I think, a dozen burfis on the offering, for Mangalartik every morning. But inevitably, there'd be some had already been taken. And so, there might be half a dozen or so burfies to start off the serving. And I remember, I'd taken this vow more or less. Okay, I won't take. I could have taken what I wanted first, but I thought we'll serve the devotees, and then what's left over, I'll honour that. And the most difficult thing to serve out, everything else was pretty easy, but the most difficult thing to serve was the burfi, because I'd taken this vow that I would only take the remnants of what was left over. And so I remember handing around the burfis, and we'd get to almost to the end of the line, and there'd be one burfi left. And I'd be praying to Krishna, please make sure that these next 3 devotees don't take the burfi. And then I think, why am I praying? I shouldn't be praying like that. I should just be serving free from personal motivations. But I remember the relief. So I pushed that thought out of my mind. But I remember the relief when I got to the end of the line and there was one burfi left. And so I could have a burfi. But I found that much more satisfying. I could have just taken the burfi beforehand, before I presented it to everybody else. But I thought, let me first of all offer everything to the devotees, and then what Krishna has left over, then I'll accept that as Krishna's mercy. Sometimes all the burfi, all the sweets were gone, but I discovered that even though I didn't get the burfi, still my satisfaction from serving the devotees first, before serving myself, was higher. I got a deeper sense of satisfaction from serving others and seeing them pleased. Again, it's this principle. And we can understand also, Prabhupada teaches, Krishna himself says, if you're pleasing my devotees, then that's pleasing to me. So I guess this, this mood of service, without personal motivation, without personal desires, and with a desire to please Krishna. And since we can't serve Krishna personally, we serve by serving his devotees. This is an essential element for us to make advancement in Krishna consciousness, and that advancement is guaranteed. Why we accept service to the spiritual master, because Krishna himself says, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, by rendering service to the spiritual master. And of course, in one sense, all of the devotees are our spiritual masters, in that we're servants of all of the devotees. And certainly when we're new to Krishna consciousness, and we should probably embrace this mood. Even when we're not new to Krishna consciousness, it's the right mentality, the right mood, is that all of the devotees are senior to us, and so they're all our gurus. Certainly, when I joined the temple, everybody was more advanced than me, and that's how I saw them. And by seeing the devotees in that mood and by rendering service to them, we make progress. We make rapid spiritual advancement. We don't need to be a pure devotee, but we can, in order to render devotional service, but if we're prepared to embrace the principles given to us by our spiritual master and, Krishna's representatives, the spiritual master, plus those who work with and serve the spiritual master, then that's very that's Krishna is satisfied by that. This is a very essential element of what we do in ISKCON. Rendering service ultimately to Srila Prabhupada, rendering service to Prabhupada's representatives, and doing it in that mood. It's interesting. I'm teaching Bhakti Shastri at the moment. We're doing the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and even this principle, you know, is mentioned very early on in the Bhagavad Gita. I was just listening to the next section. And we're looking at the second chapter, beginning with text 31. And where is it? Here it is, text 38. There's an interesting reference. Sukha dukkha same kritva labha labho jaya jayo, right? And so it's interesting there, and this is just about karma and, you know, being free from sinful reactions and doing your duty. Krishna mentions fight for the sake of fighting. So this is introduced very early on in our in the Bhagavad Gita, this principle of detachment and of rendering service. And Krishna is encouraging Arjuna, you know, do your duty. And for us, service is what we do. That's our life, practically speaking. And he said, but how? Again, this is this mood is mentioned without considering happiness or distress. Sukha dukkha same kritva. Act with equanimity, I guess. Same means, you know, seeing things the same. Sukha and dukkha, happiness and distress. Get a burfi, don't get a burfi. Right? Doesn't matter. Labha labho, without loss or without considering loss or gain. Jaya jayo, victory or defeat. And by so doing, na evam papam avapsyasi, you'll be free from sinful reaction. So it's interesting, even, you know, this mood of detached service, doing one's duty without attachment, is a basic for freeing oneself from sinful reactions. What to speak of, you know, developing or cultivating an attitude, a relationship with Krishna through his and Krishna's devotees. Well, a relationship with Krishna through serving Krishna's devotees. This mood of service without expectation is essential for our progress in devotional service. So how are we going here? I might finish. Does anybody have any comments or questions? You can raise your hands. You know how to raise your virtual hand? Okay, Ambika. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Aniruddha Prabhu. Thank you for this wonderful class and for telling your stories. I wanted to ask that which kind of things would be unfavorable for such devotion?
Well, what happens is when we render service like this, then very often we'll be elevated into positions of responsibility. If you're eager to serve, then in ISKCON, don't worry about having enough to do. You'll end up with more than you could manage, I'm sure. But as a consequence of that, you'll be, well, there's a couple of things. You can enjoy it, right? You can actually derive great pleasure from being a servant, and you'll get praised. You'll be given money, right? And so you even may become learned. You'll and even renounced. But sometimes those benefits that you get can also be obstacles, because as a result of material benefits, we start to become comfortable with the facilities that we've been given, and as a result, a bit of laziness can creep in. And so instead of enjoying the service and the opportunity to render service to devotees, we can fall into the trap of enjoying the facilities and the amenity that Krishna will give us. And so as a consequence then, and this is why Lord Chaitanya prays, right? Nardanam, no money, Narjanam, no followers, Narsundarim, beautiful women, right? Because we'll get those things as a servant in ISKCON. If you are successful, then you will also get, and even Prabhupada says we shouldn't forget that Krishna is the source of both spiritual and material success, right? But it's how we need to maintain that attitude and mood of detached service. Otherwise, Prabhupada says we shouldn't be surprised that women and money become distractions for devotees, or, the opposite gender and money become our enemies, because they're the emblems or the symbols of sense gratification. And so Anata Nivritti stage of devotional service can be a challenge for one who's served and been successful, and then faces the attraction to material enjoyment. So some of the trappings, if you like, of spiritual progress can also give rise to anatas manifesting, and they're there, but we haven't noticed them until the opportunities that are presented become weeds that have to be pulled out. And sometimes the weeds look like the bhakti lata. They're very similar to the bhakti lata. They're very similar to the bhakti lata. And so Lord Chaitanya mentions how we should be gardeners, and we should learn to discriminate between the weeds and the bhakti lata, and pull out the weeds. And that can be quite difficult sometimes, because the weeds look very similar to the bhakti plant, if you like. The process of bhakti can give rise to anatas, and at that point we then need to be careful in ensuring that we pull they're like weeds. we need to be careful about pulling them out, lest they choke up our devotion. How does that sound?
Thank you very much.
Okay, Lalita, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you so much for explaining to us like what should be our mood while serving the devotees. And as you said that you are feeling very happy while serving the prasadam, while cooking for others. Even I felt the similar thing which happened in my life. Like when I joined for Bhakti Shastri at VIHE, I was amazed to see that on the first day they provided this printout guidelines on how to serve prasadam. And Prashanta Mataji was explaining, first you serve water and then you serve rotis and sabjis, salad. So there was a whole list how to serve prasadam. And at the last, you go and you ask if the devotees need anything else with a smile on the face. And even while serving, we just take the half spoon of rice or dal or whatever may be and place it very humbly, like not take and just dump everything into the plate. So Mataji, Mataji was explaining everything so nicely. And even when we were engaged, we were made into a teams for each week, and we used to serve the devotees. We used to wash the plates, we used to arrange the water glasses, and we used to serve them. And it was a very nice feeling. It was a very satisfied feeling to serve devotees. And sometimes I feel that what's missing with the online classes and the on-site classes is serving the devotees. It used to be a lot of fun to serve devotees, and it was so nice to serve prasadam and do other services, menial services to devotees. And I feel by that, the devotees get satisfied. And I could understand the Shastras in a deep way. And now I'm missing this part so much. So thank you so much for telling the greatness about the service. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, it's better to serve without asking. You should know, right? This is a bit of a trick. I learned this from serving Tamal Krishna Maharaj, especially Jayapataka Maharaj also. You should know what your what do we call them? The person that you're serving, you should know what they want next without asking. This is the subtlety of serving prasadam. And as you say, you know, we often have devotees who are serving prasadam, you know, and they just plonk, you know, they just go plonk, and they give you, you know, 5 times the amount of rice that you could possibly eat. And I guess they're following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya, you know, who would feed everybody 5 times more than they could eat. But, you know, realistically, if you tried doing something like that to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you'd have your ears pinned back, right? So you need to be, and it's a very subtle, it's a subtle art, but very important, so that, you know, and I don't know how you do this exactly, but, you know, after practice, you can work out, okay, here's the amount that this person normally eats, right? So it's an intimate thing. And so you show, and so one of the first things you do is you show what you're going to serve, as you say, on the spoon. And then you tip it in such a way so that, but keep an eye on what the person, and they'll indicate, you know, enough, right? So there's no speaking in doing this. and then you observe what they like, right? You observe what they like, and then you offer that again, but not, you know, sort of sploosh on the plate and bang, but rather give, you know, what's appropriate. But keep an eye on who you're serving, because especially with devotees like Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he would indicate just with a slight movement of his head whether he wanted it or not. And, you know, if you misread and put it on his plate when he didn't want it, like, what are you doing, you idiot? Right? So it's very subtle. And so really, and you know, it's not that we should be waiting to be told what to do. We should automatic, you know, and this applies to other things other than distributing prashadam, although that's important. It's very important because that teaches you then the subtleties of service. And one of them is you need to anticipate what's required, right? We need to think about and naturally intuit what's required next. You know, that's a symptom of advancement in a devotee. In the services that we might be doing, we should know what we need to do next. We don't need to be told what to do. We spontaneously or instantaneously know what needs to be done through experience and through, I guess it's intuition, buddhi, right? So higher than asking is actually knowing who you're serving, what they need, what they require, and doing that beforehand. That's a symptom of an advanced servant, if you like. Doesn't have to be told what to do. He automatically knows what to do. He or she knows what to do. Okay, good point. Thank you. Anil.
Hare Krishna, Dhanasram Puji. So enlightening lecture. My question is that when we come for the service, actually in the association of the devotees, there are the devotees from the different backgrounds. So they have the different culture, different mindset of the different understanding. They are facing different type of anarthas, but we have to serve together. In that time, we face the problem. Some negativity comes. Suppose we are practicing the service attitude, negativity will come there from the any devotee. So how to just keep on carry your mood of the devotion to pleasing devotees and pleasing authority and Krishna. So this is my question. And second is this, what are the tools of the service? Like some tools, responsibility must be there, honesty must be there, and service attitude must be there. Like, can you tell some tools in a crisp, so we always remember when we are going for the service, focus on that.
Yes, that's a really interesting question. We're dealing with different cultures. And in fact, what we're doing is we're learning a completely new culture. You know, like I said before, serving others was not something that I was more interested in just what I could get for myself and having others serve me. And, you know, the notion or the idea of being a servant of others was, it was pretty new, a new concept. And, you know, in the various cultures of the world, there are different manifestations of these same issue or elements, if you like. Now, one has to be constantly learning about the people that we're working with. We need to inquire. You know, I was saying before that you know, we should intuitively know what somebody needs. But if you don't, what do? You can't just assume. And so therefore, if you look at that verse, 4:34, it's really instructive, because the first thing that's required is pranipatena, right? Pranipat. We should always be respectful to others, right? And then the next item is pariprashna. We should be questioning. So, you know, if you want to get to know somebody, if you want to know their needs, and in any situation, practically speaking, we need to be inquisitive. If we don't know intuitively what needs to be done, then we need to know how to ask the right questions to find out what's required. If we're going to solve problems and solve issues, we need to be able to we have to be respectful, and that requires cultivation, right? It doesn't necessarily come automatically. And you know, that'll be tested. Our immediate response sometimes to a difficult situation is to just get angry because, you know, out of frustration. But we need to control that, be tolerant, and then be humble and submissive, and then inquire what's needed here. So there needs to be that respectful and inquisitive mood. And so, especially in a group setting, and in a group setting where there are cultural challenges or anomalies, we need to be very respectful, but then appropriately inquisitive to find out what's needed here. What are your expectations? And you know, this is especially leadership means you become a facilitator. Not that automatically you have all of the solutions and you just tell everybody what to do. You can be very embarrassed if you have that attitude, because you may not know everything. In fact, most often you don't. And so therefore, in order to discover how to solve a problem, maintain respect for others, and then inquire appropriately as to, you know, what needs to be done. This is a sign of a good leader. I might have mentioned this, I've certainly told this story more than once. A friend of mine, Vanadara, she's a Prabhupada disciple, one of the first devotees that I ever met. She was one of my, amongst my group of friends in my early 20s, but she became a devotee. And her son joined the Navy, and he was an officer in training. And he told us that sometimes what they do on exercises is they will brief an officer who's leading up a group that you're in charge. You're the person who's going to be in charge here, and you're leading the group. But at the same time, they'll choose another person, they'll tell him the same thing. Right? You're in charge, you're leading the group. Right? So they've got two people heading into the take charge. But of course, you can imagine the conflict when two people turn up and they think they're in charge. And so, but they're actually testing them. I said to him, well, what do? Do you just push the other guy aside? And he said, no, that's the worst thing you can do. You've got to learn how to accommodate all the varieties of personalities that you're working with, and you've got to work towards building a team. And so, you know, they're observing what they're doing, and they're testing their officers to see how well they'll work together. You know, and those that work together rather than those that are the most assertive are the ones who demonstrate the leadership characteristics. So yeah, we in ISKCON especially, we have to take into consideration cultural differences, and that's illustrated by Srila Prabhupada. You know, when he first went to America, in the first 6 months to a year, he said himself, "I was just learning how people do things here." Right? So Prabhupada was investigating the food. You know, when Prabhupada went to America, he wasn't even confident as to whether he was going to be able to get something to eat or not, because he knew, you know, that there's a culture of meat eating in the country. So, you know, Prabhupada explored the American culture in his first year of staying in America, so that he could understand, you know, what he was dealing with, who he was dealing with, what adjustments he needed to make. And we know, you know, Srila Prabhupada made some significant adjustments. He allowed, for example, and Prabhupada said, and this is my genius, I allowed for women staying in the temple, for example, for which he was criticized roundly by his godbrothers. You know, they thought Srila Prabhupada was destroying, you know, Vaishnava culture by allowing women to stay in temples. Of course, you know, not with restrictions, obviously, right? But Prabhupada's godbrothers thought he was contaminating Gaudiya culture. And they criticized him. Yet Prabhupada said, that was my genius. So, yeah, Prabhupada example, we can take advantage of it. Does that make sense? And that's one of the biggest challenges we have actually in our society, is accommodating. Well, what's our philosophy? First of all, you're not the body. But you're not the body, sure, but we're conditioned. We're conditioned souls. We're not all, you know, Paramahamsas on the self-realized platform. Like, you know, Sukadev Goswami, for example, you know, we're not on the Avadhuta platform immediately. So therefore, and Prabhupada teaches us, again from Rupa Goswami, we adjust Kala Desha Patra, right? Time, Desha, place, and Patra, Prabhupada says person, or time, place, and circumstance. Very important considerations. Okay.
Some elements also might be explained as I tell some tools for the service, like responsibility, like honesty, this type of that we can meditate every time when we are going for the service. So how to do our service in a better way.
Yeah. Yes, which is all based on, you know, unmotivated, ahoitiki. Yeah. Irina.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for giving your taste for service and encouraging us to do so. I have 2 questions. The first one, you mentioned that our position as a devotee, not only as a new devotee, but for all times, it's to feel that everyone is superior to us. So they're as our gurus. And then you mentioned that in terms of serving them, I just want to make sure that I understood correctly. It doesn't mean that we take their advice. We just look at everyone as a guru in terms of serving them as to a guru, if I understood it correctly.
Yeah, that's a good. That's a good. That's a good point. You know, the Mahabhagavat sees everybody as superior, and so, and that, you know, that's a deeply felt. It's how they see things. It's not something that they just put on. But as Madhyamadikaris, we should, Prabhupada encourages us at least to come to the platform of Madhyam Bhakta quickly. And that means then, and that's pretty much a platform upon which ISKCON devotees should operate in their social interactions, social discourse. And that means to understand, and Rupa Goswami recommends, you know, encourages us to understand where everybody is situated and where we're situated as well. And so there are the neophytes or the beginners, there's the middle, the Madhyam Bhaktas who are more advanced and more philosophically astute, more situationally aware. And then the Mahabhagavat is a very exalted and very elevated platform. So we should have that attitude or that mood of service, you know, in that attitude of, you know, everybody's more advanced than me. But realistically, we should be aware of where everybody is situated. And as you say, you know, we don't serve everybody like they're our guru and that they're in the position of instructing us. We're careful. We have to be careful about who we take instructions from. And who we give instructions to based on our relationships. And we need to be aware of those relationships. You know, we should know who's superior, who's inferior, who's on a peer platform. We should know that. But yes, at the same time, good point, we should serve everybody in that mood of humility and of accepting everyone as let's say, worthy of service, not necessarily that they're more advanced than us, but, you know, the idea is that if we, so, and, you know, I was looking at there was a title of a book, and the title, I'm going to look at it a bit more, but the title, it's a book about leadership. And what it says is, again, on this prasadam metaphor, if you like, but the title of the book is Leaders Eat Last, right? So with that mood of wanting to serve others, important in our relationship with everybody, but of course you're right, we don't treat everybody as if they're superior to us, because they may not be. They may not be, and we should know that, yes. And Rupa Goswami recommends, you know, to be discriminating. And that's why in the Nectar of Instruction, we find, you know, what is it? Krishneti yasya giritam manasadriyeta. You know, anybody who chants Hare Krishna, we respect them, at least within the mind, right? But dikshasti chet pranati, you know, anybody who's taken initiation, we bow down and offer our obeisances, right? And that's with the assumption that, okay, there are devotees who've taken initiation, but they're also a sadhaka. You know, there are devotees who have taken initiation, but then are not following anything, right? So you know, we may not treat, we may be a little more deferential to somebody who's initiated but's not following anything. So yes, you're right. Discrimination is required, although the mood of rendering service is appropriate.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. And the second question is...
another, I'm not a Maharaj, you can call me Prabhu.
Prabhu? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's you know, Householder devotees, generally we call them Prabhu, not Maharaj. Although you kind of can, but it's Prabhupada's kind of set up the etiquette so that we, we call householders Prabhu. Otherwise they get too puffed up. That's okay. All you're seeing is a head. And, I do have a jacket on that's kind of orange, so people might, I hadn't thought of that, but I like the color, so I bought it, but it's not because I'm a Maharaj.
Thank you for correcting me.
It's okay.
The second question is regarding service. You said that someone is eager to serve, that so much service occurs that one cannot even maybe take that much. And having this dilemma, like I've heard or maybe seen someone doing service maybe from the wrong mood, because as you try to explain that we have to serve not from seeking benefits for ourselves, but please Krishna by pleasing his devotees. So if we do it with a sincere heart, how much we can take service. And usually when someone does more than they physically or mentally can, they go into distress position. Therefore, they got angry, and when they got tired, they get more angry, in distress. So therefore, maybe that intention is already gone from the heart. They're not as pure anymore. They already like, well, no one like tells thank you to me. Like all these thoughts started coming to the head. So would you please give an advice how to differentiate when it's better to kind of stop, so at least you do it sincere, so you don't cross the line into actually making an offenses while trying to serve more than you can take, if that makes sense.
Yes, when I work that out, I'll let you know, okay?
Sorry, say it again.
When I work that one out myself, I'll let you know. I don't have the answer to that question. But
Okay.
I got some tips, I suppose.
Please.
Yeah, be realistic. And what can happen also is depression. You can't do what you want to do. And so we have to be realistic. It's not only angry, but distressed. And so know your limitations. Accept what you can practically manage. If you're a leader, delegate. You may not be able to do it yourself. Give it to others. So long as you have a strong relationship with those. If you're younger, I guess, and you're starting your career, then identify what you're good at. Understand your varna, your natural propensities to work, and do those things. Strongly cultivate Brahminical culture, Brahminical qualities, but at the same time, be aware of your natural aptitude for work. And for the ladies, that means sometimes also working out what your ashram is, and for some it means motherhood, right? And that's a full-time service. That's your full-time. If you can do anything else besides that, phew, you're lucky. But that's so. Sometimes it means accepting who you are and what you've got from the material perspective. What kind of a body I've got, what kind of a mood, what kind of an intellect, and what kind of a mentality I have, and working with those things. And I know from personal experience, there's many things I can do, but and as you get older, you just can't do them. You could, if it was just each one individually, fine, but add 20 items of things that you could do individually all together, and all of a sudden there's a principle called a principle called the Peter principle, and it's the theory that you rise to your level of incompetence. In other words, you rise in your occupational activities doing the things that you can do well. But if you add too many of them, right, you'll eventually get to the point where you can't do any of them at all. So yeah, know your limitations. And you know what's important also is have good mentors. Try to find Shiksha gurus who know you and know your limitations and know your strengths as well, you know, because, and Prabhupada says that a guru should know the psychophysical makeup of the disciple. And so good to have people who encourage you, but based on your strengths, but also are able to restrict you knowing your limitations. So, you know, having somebody to guide, and that's not easy to find people who you can trust, but that's pretty important. You know, good to have strong relationships with one's Diksha and Siksha gurus. The Diksha guru generally being the prominent Siksha guru, that's the general principle. And then having a relationship with those devotees where they're supporting you and encouraging you because they know you and know you well. You know, so and they're accessible so that you can take advantage of their guidance and support. That's really quite important. Because, you know, through their experience, they'll be able to enlighten us and advise us so that we can, and there's one quotation from Srila Prabhupada where he says, going back what you said originally, everybody's servant is nobody's servant, right? If you're running around trying to serve everybody, you'll go nuts. But if you choose who you serve, and this is important for the service to be complete and to be pleasing to Krishna, we need to ensure that we've got that relationship with our Diksha and Siksha gurus. You know, it's not just me and my Diksha guru, but you know, in the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj says, Vande Gurun. You know, his first statement is, I offer my respects to my gurus, not just to my guru. And so generally speaking, you know, it's not that we have a relationship with one person. I mean, it can be like that, but most, and especially within ISKCON, it's not. It's, you know, we have relationships with many gurus. And Srila Prabhupada always there. Even though we have a Diksha guru, we always have Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you very much. It was very enlightening. Good points. Good advice. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Hare Krishna. Thank you. It must be nearly breakfast time for you, huh? Well, where is everybody? Is everybody in India, or are we all over the globe now? Prasanta, are you there?
Oh, yes, Hare Krishna.
Where are we?
Yeah, we are all over the globe here. We are in Hawaii. We are in
Wow.
India. Where else do we are? Let me see who is here. Many are from India, actually. I can see.
Okay.
Many
So
are
it is
from
breakfast
India.
time.
But I mean, there were more students in the beginning. Backing down, I don't know exactly where she is. She's from the Philippines. I don't know where she's located. So we do have an international group, actually. This group, Aniruddha Prabhu, you'll be speaking one more time on Friday. This is supposed to be the Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav, and Bhakti Vedanta students.
Right.
3 different groups, plus there may be some guests also. We have we inform different people about this. Thank you so much, Aniruddha Prabhu. It's getting a little late. We should stop. Devotees have to prepare for their further classes. Thank you very much for joining us. And we are missing you with the lockdown, not seeing anybody. It's a very testing time. So I hope you're well. And we'll be happy to have you again on Friday.
Okay. I might talk about something else on Friday. Let's see.
Usually we do 2 times on the same topic so that it sinks in,
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll do that. Yep.
Yeah, it's better to keep to the same topic so they get a whole week meditation on the same topic.
All right. Okay.
All right. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Glories to Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Prabhu. Hare Bol.
Hare
It
Bol.
was really enlightened lecture from you.
My pleasure. We'll speak again on Friday. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.